And good afternoon. Welcome to Let's Talk, Real Talk on Parental Alienation. And today we have Joe Goldberg from Toronto and Vernon Beck from Oakville, I believe, is it Oakville?
Oakville, Ontario. Yep.
Oakville, Ontario. I am from Hamilton, Ontario. So we are very close together on this uh, podcast today, which is a very important podcast for everybody out there. So welcome alienated parents, grandparents, alienated children worldwide, and welcome professionals out there, doctors, lawyers, judges, you name it. If you're out there, please listen to this podcast today because these two gentlemen have something very serious to talk about on how we could help children that have been alienated from a parent over the last 60 years that I know of. And we need to put a stop to this so our children don't grow up to be, dissociated on their way of life these days. Because many of these kids don't are stuck at the age they were alienated, and if they were not alienated, they would be in a better place. And Joe Goldberg today will talk about the children and dissociative disorders, and Vernon Beck will talk about parenting plan, and together they can help to, make a world of difference in the courtrooms for you today. So welcome, Joe and Vernon. I'm going to let Joe talk first, and then Vernon, you can join in and tell us about your parenting plan. I know a lot about it, so I'm grateful for all your education. So, Joe, welcome.
Thank you, Mary.
Oh, we got Andy Martin's coming. Give me a second.
Okay.
Hey, Mary, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, Andy. You're a little late, but you know what?
I had some issues this morning again, and completely forgot about it until the
It's okay.
11th hour. But I'm here.
But well, we got Joe back and we got Vernon back, so we're just getting off to
All
start
right.
with Joe. He's going to introduce himself, so you could ask after Vernon comes on, okay?
All right.
So go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Thanks, Mary. I was thinking about what I was going to say today. Um, I think a lot of people may know that for a very long time I've been involved in the field of parental alienation and been an advocate of the theory of parental alienation. I've put on conferences in Toronto and New York and in Quebec on educating psycholegal professionals about parental alienation. Vern has been a part of my conferences from the very beginning. Vern, you remember our first one at the Metro Toronto Convention Center back in 2009, right?
Yeah, I certainly remember that. Yeah, a lot of good people from all over North America and the world were gathered at that event. So,
Correct.
And my apologies for not mentioning the workshop you just put on in April, which I attended with some other advocates in the area. So that was amazing. We did, learn a lot, and it's grateful that you can do that for us.
Right. And of course, Vernon, I really appreciate the fact that you came not just to watch, but to help us with the event. And we appreciate that very much, Mary. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Wendy McDonald, who also kudos to her for helping us as well. We appreciate that. Just want to give a shout out to the people that helped make that workshop, successful.
Right. There was Penny Fisher, Mike McConnell. I mean, there was some pretty good people there that are really there to help the children.
Well, I would have been there too, Joe, but I'm 410 miles northwest of Toronto, so I didn't have my Learjet ready to go on the runway to come down to Toronto.
I was there for you.
Well,
yeah, that's right.
The good news, Andy, is you can still watch that workshop because it was filmed at the University of Toronto, and it's now been uploaded onto my website. So for anybody that wants to know what that workshop is about, you can go to adolescentdissociativedisorders.com and look under the tab for education and philanthropy, and you'll see information about what the workshop was about. And you can register and you can take the workshop and see what Vernon and I were discussing. So anyway, just to segue over to the fact this is a show about parental alienation, and the fact that I have this well-established history as a proponent of alienation. Again, I was thinking what I could talk about today that would highlight my perspective about the theory of parental alienation. And I just want to say that I have some things to say that may not sit well with a lot of people, because the research that I've been involved in over the last few years has led me to a new conclusion about parental alienation and parental alienation theory. And basically, the theory has been disconfirmed by recent scientific research. So in other words, parental alienation is really not the explanation that people are looking for when they have children that are rejecting them. And to make my point a little bit more easy to digest, I want to talk about some things that Richard Gardner said. And I'm going to quote from his article in 1985. And in 1985, he said, "The concept of the parental alienation syndrome includes not only conscious, but subconscious and unconscious factors." And then he said, and this is extremely important, he put that in parenthesis, "It includes factors that arise within the child, independent of the parental contributions." Now, when Gardner was talking about these factors that arise within the child back in 1985, there's been a lot of research in multidisciplinary fields where these factors have been ignored by the scholars and experts in the parental alienation world. Basically, 30 years have gone by and there's not any references to dissociative disorders. There wasn't any inclusion of dissociative disorders in the DSM in 1985. That didn't happen until 2013. But there are other factors in addition to dissociative disorders, which also can account for why children might be rejecting of a parent. And those factors include things like self-regulation failure, neurobiological factors, pain catastrophizing, stress and cognitive mechanisms, and depletion effects. And all of these topics that have a wide body of research for many decades has been ignored. And a lot of these factors, some of them were discussed in the workshop that Vernon and I presented on. So some of these factors that arise within the child could not have been contemplated by Gardner back in 1985 because this research took place afterwards. But the fact that none of these factors have ever been referenced in any journal articles in the study of parental alienation shows the neglect of scientific rigor in parental alienation theory. Now that's—
Can you expand on that? What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that Gardner said you have to consider these factors that arise within the child, and there's been no effort to really investigate those factors. The only person who really tried to revise the theory of alienation was Janet Johnston back in 2001 when she wrote her seminal article on the alienated child. And she talked about these multiple other factors that were contributions by the non-offending parent. But since then, 20 years have passed since that article, and there still hasn't been any recognition of these neurobiological factors or medical factors like pain catastrophizing research. So I'm going to ignore that. Unfortunately, my phone is ringing. Hold on a second.
Call from Albany, NY.
I'm sorry about this interruption.
That's okay.
There was one other factor that I wanted to reference, and that is Gardner said in his definition, when true parental abuse and or neglect is present, the child's animosity may be justified. And so the parental alienation syndrome.
Call from Albany, NY.
I'm so sorry about this. Excuse me. I'm really sorry about this.
Can you mute your mic and we'll get Vernon to say something?
Hello?
You could answer.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm in the middle of a podcast right now. Can we reconvene this call later? Thank you. So I apologize for that.
Okay.
What I was trying to say here is Gardner said in his definition, he said, when true parental alienation abuse, when true parental abuse and or neglect is present, the child's animosity may be justified. And so the parental alienation syndrome explanation for the child's hostility is not applicable, right? But what this definition left out at the time is that in cases of real abuse, the child is not always aware of the abuse. And the reason is because the child that is abused develops dissociation and dissociative symptoms. And one of the features of that condition is amnesia. So a child can't be justified in their rejection of a parent. That's not the litmus test that determines if it's parental alienation. What it signifies is that there's something going on within the child that hasn't been considered, that hasn't been contemplated, that would explain why the child is rejecting the parent. And that has to do with the attachment to a parent that they can't escape from, they can't avoid. And the only way to cope and survive in that environment is to suppress the thoughts, suppress the memories.
Right.
And eventually what happens is that cognitive strategy of the child impairs the hippocampus in the brain. And that has been proven in scientific studies over and over again. So this amnesia that people talk about in parental alienation when they interview kids in the extreme cases where a child can't remember ever having a good time with the parent they've rejected, and they can't think of anything bad about the parent that they're attached to. There's this state of amnesia, which has never been really explained by anybody in parental alienation. And the explanation lies elsewhere in the cognitive scientific research of dissociative disorders. So I'm sorry monopolizing the time to explain this, but
Okay, we got time.
But that's the reason really why there's this rejection of parents, because they're in this environment of child abuse that's undetected by the psycholegal professionals that they're surrounded by, tasked to determine where the parenting time and custody should be placed. But these are people that are not experienced in dissociative disorders. Instead, they're investigating parenting behavior, and even people that work in child protection agencies, DCF and CAS, these child protection agency workers, they have no training whatsoever. They don't know how to do any of the testing, interviewing, or evaluations to determine if a child has a dissociative disorder. And because of that, child abuse goes unrecognized in
Right.
tens of thousands of cases. And it's not just the emotional abuse, but hidden cases of physical abuse, hidden cases of sexual abuse. And the one thing I will say about parental alienation theory, which we can hold on to, is the fact that the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation has confirmed that when a child is exposed to enough alienating behavior, it creates the trauma that leads to the dissociative disorder. So we can't say that children are alienated. We shouldn't talk about it in those terms anymore. We should instead be saying alienating behavior will cause the trauma that will lead to the child's dissociation. And that's what's hiding the real problem, which is child abuse. That's all I want to say.
I remember being on trial, and my youngest daughter, she was 31. She was telling the judge after 18 years alienated, she said, she didn't alienate us. We alienated her. So they know what they were doing. This is like verbal, and it is evident that they know that they are doing alienating things to the parent, the other parent. So, but thanks on that one, Joe. That's very interesting. We'll get back onto that. Well, let's get Vernon to put his self out
Yeah,
here.
I can throw my 2 cents in, I guess. Certainly it was a pleasure working with Joe at the workshop there, I guess about a month ago. And Joe has brought in a very interesting twist to this whole concept of parental alienation. Believe it or not, many years ago, when Gardner was alive, I was actually communicated with him, and he sent me one of his first VHS tapes. I don't know if I still got it or not, but one of his videos that he did. But certainly over the years, the term parental alienation has kind of got into kind of the family court industry and whatever. And of course, it's been a lot of people argued against it because they kept saying, well, it's not a psychological condition. You know, it's just a kind of a name that they've come up with, which is true to some extent. From the work I do is I still kind of use the term, not parental alienation so much, but we kind of use the term alienating behaviors. And just as Joe pointed out, what people have been calling parental alienation for so many years is really the first step. So a lot of these cases are parents who engage in what we've become to know as alienating behaviors. And of course, as Joe said, the alienating behaviors result in a trauma. And then, of course, to stop these people who are claiming that it's just a junk scientist, this is where the term dissociative disorders explains it from at a psychological level, something that would be professionally recognized as a disorder of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the ways that people used to attack Gardner's theory. First, it was the word syndrome. That was one of the first mistakes he made, as he used the term syndrome. As soon as you put the word syndrome in there, well, that's got something to do. You need to be a mental health professional to be able to determine that. So, the word syndrome kind of got thrown out over the years, and parental alienation kind of moved in, kind of a progression. And then after, now we're at a point where it's alienating behaviors to trauma, and now to dissociative disorders, as Joe has spoken on. So we've kind of come along, I guess, a full circle now. And I think now there's a psychological explanation to identify children. And now we can still come up with an explanation to show how it goes from point A to point B. So a lot of the work I do is probably in the area of looking at the behaviors that start the trauma, which leads on to dissociative disorders. So that's
Hmm.
where I kind of see where we're at now.
Okay. So how do you propose to do all these, educate them, Joe, the courts on what you do? Like, what do we do? Videos, get them into conferences, seminars?
Uh, well, there's a much faster and easier process that I've already started the process of, and it really is the workshop that provides the best mechanism for very quickly educating hundreds and thousands of professionals. You know, people have often talked about like, how do you change the system? How do you do that? Do we educate the parents? How do we change the culture of the legal system? And I will tell you what my strategy is. It's really pretty simple. I'm going to tell you who's useful and who's not.
Okay.
The community that's not very useful is the legal community. Lawyers are just simply not interested in taking the time to understand something so far different outside their wheelhouse, uh, because they have their own legal strategies for these complex cases. So I don't waste my time trying to educate lawyers. What I will tell you is that my personal experience as a legal consultant, when a client hires me and I get the opportunity to work on a case directly with an attorney, I have nothing but their full cooperation. They love what they're hearing from me, and they understand how to litigate these cases completely different than the way that they were. They just didn't understand that there's a scientific direction to take these courses in that would eliminate all the unnecessary approaches that they've been using, like motions for sole custody and motions to enforce parenting time and motions for contempt and motions to show cause. All of this all these litigious approaches are a waste of time. But where the correct course of changing all of this dynamic is more useful is with the mental health community, you see, because the mental health community understands trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the large majority of mental health professionals are untrained in their careers in understanding dissociative disorders, they're very motivated and they're very interested in this area because they've all been working. So many of them work with families that go through high conflict child custody battles and disputes. So they're used to seeing a lot of this dynamic play out in their sessions with clients. They understand what high conflict divorces with children can do and how
Right.
it can compromise people. But what they will learn from the workshop is that now there's scientific research that can prove how child abuse can hide in plain sight of people and how they can now learn how to better identify the symptoms. And when they understand what we're talking about in the workshop, they'll be able to promote the importance of having children evaluated for dissociative disorders to confirm or disconfirm that condition, because in this environment of high conflict child custody disputes, it's almost impossible for a child not to develop a dissociative disorder. And so therefore, if the evaluation of these children confirms the diagnosis, it will lead to the recommendation that places them in the right form of treatment, you see, for individual therapy. There's a very specific model for treating dissociative disorders. And when you get children steered into the right interventions for therapy, that rejection of that non-offending parent will fall back into place because children just need to understand why they had to behave the way they did to survive in that environment of abuse. And when mental health professionals become attuned to the workshop material, they'll be looking at their clients and listening to their stories, and they'll be saying, I think we need to get your kid evaluated for dissociative disorder because I think that's what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And as more professionals gain access to the workshop, and I will say that, I'm disseminating the workshop as a public service for free to many mental health professionals by the hundreds, so that this workshop can educate these professionals that work with families in high conflict situations, so they can be the first responders to steer people in the right direction. Because talking about parental alienation today is counterproductive. It actually distracts somebody from going in the right direction. People have been so tracked into proving parental alienation and listening to things that they're hearing about parental alienation theory. They have a hard time accepting that there could be an alternative explanation out there. And I will tell you myself, my personal experience, when I was an advocate of parental alienation, and I believed in it so fervently, when Janet Johnston started talking about criticizing Gardner, I felt like I was being personally attacked for believing in it. I felt like, who is this person to discredit Gardner? Gardner is a child psychiatrist who's written 5 textbooks about child psychiatry. He was a god in psychiatry long before he came up with parental alienation theory. Who was she or they or anyone to try and discredit Gardner for what he had found and what he was reporting? And so it was very hard for me to accept that parental alienation theory could be wrong. But today, I'm a different guy. And I see that science has really steered us on the right pathway to solving this problem. But now it's all about helping people understand about dissociative disorders. And another part of dissociative disorders is self-injuring behavior. And when you have a child that throws away a parent who's loving and caring and supportive, who has no history of abuse or neglect, and that child just wants to throw that parent in the garbage can and say, well, I don't need that person in my life anymore. If that's not self-injuring behavior, I don't know what is.
That's so true.
And when people study the research about the comorbidity related to dissociative disorders, they'll understand self-harming behavior is one of the dominant comorbid conditions, self-injuring behavior. And all of the DSM-5 criteria, A through F, that describes the criteria for non-suicidal self-injuring disorder aligns 100% with the symptomatology of parental alienation, which I think is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. It is. I'm going to get Andy to jump in here and put his 2 cents in as well.
I can't compete with these heavy hitters, Mary.
Oh, no, very informative.
These guys are know what they're talking about.
Well, but, yeah, it was a quite interesting 2 days that I sat through this. I didn't get it all that first day, but I tell you, the second day it was.
Yeah, I followed that with when you went there, and I was born and raised in Toronto too. But the one heavy hitter there was on video. I was thinking maybe he'll come and speak live in Toronto, but
Sam back then.
Yeah, it wasn't the case.
Yeah, no, he was filmed or videoed.
But I want to say this to you, both Joe and to Vernon, that we've been doing a lot of these shows with Mary and I, but I think it's a decision that you need to make in terms of a relationship. We've had a relationship for over 3 years now with doing these shows, and you make the call. It's like a light switch. These people that get involved with parental alienation, I agree with what Joe was saying, and I use I've been with the same woman for 40 years, so I do these shows for Mary because I think it's really unfair. Nobody should have lived through what she's lived through. But these people are deliberately evil. And I bring the case of my wife's sister's, uh, the youngest brother, my brother-in-law is really not, but he deliberately alienated my wife's sister's kids. And it was a deliberate attempt. So that's deliberate. So once you know that you're dealing with that, it's not going to be, as Joe said, a normal mindset to say, okay, we're in a relationship, whether it's a marriage or relationship, or Mary and I doing the show, we talk every day. There's give and take and whatever. I mean, you work together. You want to be with those people. Life is precious, but these people, there's a disconnect there. This isn't normal. Somebody that wants to alienate the sister's kids, and now but it was the perfect breeding ground. They know what they're doing. The husband was a truck driver. They lived in Holland Landing, north of Toronto, north of Newmarket, and he was never home. So it was the perfect breeding ground to do what was done. And now they've moved on and moved to London or Ingersoll, Woodstock, somewhere around there. And the first husband has Parkinson's, early onset of Parkinson's at 63. Well, people that have alienated other people's kids, whether it's your own kids or your sister's kids, they don't care. They move on. The husband's gotten sick. You think they'll stick around and help the guy? And no, it's the first wife that's doing that. So there's no feeling, and you can't get a normal relationship from these people. You just can't. So I'm looking at that and saying, yeah, you can if you want to, because Mary and I talk every day. She's the executive producer of all of these shows, but you're talking about Mary's ex, or you're talking about my wife's sister's ex. These people it can't be done, and it's rather sad. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, anything that we do, we can't reverse this process. We can't reverse the damage that has been done to Mary's children over 18 years, to my wife's sister's kids over 18 years, 20 years.
Well,
you
Andy,
can't reverse that.
And Andy, let me just jump in and say this. There is something that we can do. And we're on the first step of doing it, and that is we have to change our minds and other people's minds, that when you think alienation, don't think alienation, think abuse, talk about abuse, don't talk about alienation. The problem is that dissociative disorders that are caused by child abuse are not diagnosed in childhood very often, very rarely. They're usually diagnosed when the children become adults. So what we're trying to change is the ability to have these children evaluated while they are still children, while the abuse is still ongoing, to stop it at the earliest possible stage. Yes, we can't do anything about the fact that they've done tremendous damage to these kids because of their abuse. But what we can do is we can get them evaluated, and we can get them into the right treatment. And it's going to become a new crop of professionals engaged in the family court system that have never appeared before. For example, when you have an expert witness that goes to court that explains to a judge why a child needs to be evaluated for a dissociative disorder, which a judge has never heard about before, because a lawyer can't explain what a dissociative disorder is. A lawyer needs an expert witness to come to court to explain to a judge what a dissociative disorder is, how it is appearing, how the symptoms appear, and why a judge should have a child tested over the objections of the other parent who doesn't want that child to be evaluated. Why would a parent who's abusing a child want their child to be tested and evaluated for something that could confirm the fact that they're an abuser.
Yeah.
They wouldn't.
They won't.
So they're going to object to this testing. They're going to object to these evaluations. But when a judge hears from an expert witness why the court should order these evaluations over the objections of the child, over the objections of the offending parent, well, that's when these evaluations will begin. And when they begin, they will prove that the dissociative disorders are there. And that's the culture that we're trying to change. And that's what this revolution is all about. Because the more we talk about alienation, the more we get away from solving the problem. We've got to focus like a laser beam on the fact that alienation is what causes trauma. And trauma is what leads to dissociative disorders. And if you know that much, then that's all that you really need to know. Then you need to tell your lawyer, I want my kid tested for a dissociative disorder. Forget all these other emotions that you try to drag me into. Drop that. This is what I want done first. Forget everything else. I'll sacrifice my parenting time, but I want my kid to be tested. I want to find out if my kid has this problem, because if it is, I can get them treated. And once the child gets into therapy with a therapist that treats dissociative disorders, it could change the schematic for custody, because you really can't do therapy with dissociative children and adolescents unless the children are safe. And that safety factor has to be determined by the therapist. Can a child that's being abused in an environment be left in the custody of an abusive parent? Well, that's a question we're going to have to find out.
Mm-hmm.
The more cases that test that hypothesis in court, the faster we'll learn how quickly we can change this dynamic. So
that in there, Joe, and of course with the work that I do, is that if you are going to go to court and you're trying to get an order to go for therapy and whatever, again, you've got to be able to provide some information that may convince a judge to do that. Now, the work I do, of course, is we're looking into what we refer to as the behaviors. And I do have cases ongoing right now where the child hasn't been what people would call alienated yet, but it's starting. Okay. So the idea is that certainly from the work I've done over the years is we look at one of the programs I developed years ago was it was called hostile aggressive parenting. And it was kind of circulated, HAP it was referred to. About 25 years ago, I put that together. But the idea, all it was a collection of things that parents would do, alienating behaviors. You know, not let the child talk on the phone, not do this, not do that, talk badly, prevent the other parent from going to school. I think I had about 200 various factors under what I call diagnostic checklist for hostile aggressive parenting. Now, again, that's not going to diagnose the trauma, but what it's saying is that there are things going on that will show that if continued, that this will create trauma. So I kind of work at the early ages where we're developing the checklist and what I refer to as a risk indicator. There's a number of risk indicators. So for instance, if you have a parent who's engaged in what we refer to as these behaviors, one of the risk factors is, of course, their childhood, where they brought up into an environment where they may have been, again, using the term alienated from a parent, and was there a lot of conflict. So that's the kind of the area that I look into or work on, is developing checklists that would help a lawyer, if necessary, to get an assessment on dissociative disorders, because it's going to be difficult for some lawyer who doesn't even, or a judge who doesn't know anything about it, to make an order that they're going to go to some kind of therapy or treatment without there's some kind of evidence to support that may be necessary. That's
Exactly.
kind of
Like
there.
Vern, I agree with you. Like
Yeah.
there's more than there's going to be multiple models for how we go about achieving our goals here. But you're correct in that you're offering another pathway to help lawyers and people that come to you for parenting plans and strategies with their attorneys. Um, that that kind of introduction of information will be extremely useful in achieving these goals. So it's good to have Vern here to explain that.
Hmm.
Well, as I said, one of the things that if you're able to nip things in the bud, more or less to say, certainly I've worked as a parenting coordinator for a number of years, and I like to kind of do forensic investigations into cases to find out where things go wrong. But quite often, parenting coordinators are accepted by the courts as being a positive influence, and yes, they are. Because we do know in a lot of these cases, parents are up against maybe a person who's a narcissist. Well, a narcissist do not want to be seen by other people or other people in the community as doing the things that they do.
Hmm.
So by bringing in a parenting coordinator or a coordinator, I work with a team, so we try to get more than one parent coordinator on a case to eliminate some of the bias that some people may claim, is that basically when people are being watched by other people in the community, and that's the way we kind of believe in, is trying to get community people in, just like we did in the good old days before there was all these high priced professionals. uh, People went to their church ministers, they could go to counselors in the area. But the old term, it takes a village to
Raise a
raise a
child.
child or to help a family, is something I certainly believe on. And because so many of these issues that families are having in the early stages. I'm not talking about when we got severe parental alienation, like in other people's cases, but if you're able to catch it at the beginning, it's quite often if you can impose common sense. And sometimes with coordination with parent coordinators and people in there helping the family through education. And a lot of it is monitoring when they know they're being watched by people who know what they're doing, have got the training, uh, and that these people might say something to the court if they continue to behave in the way that they've done. Quite often, you can start to reverse the effect of um, what we refer to as alienation before it gets into uh, dissociative disorder at its highest level, before they need diagnosis. So that's where a lot of the work I do. And one of the programs we're kind of putting together or putting the final touches on is what we refer to as a community-based parenting coordination and family support program. And what it does, it works on a basis. There's a team, not just one parenting coordinator, but two. People get to choose whether they want a woman or a man. So if the wife feels more comfortable talking to a woman, she can choose a woman from the program. If the guy feels that he'd rather talk to a man, then there's two people. And the idea is they can collect information twice as fast because now you're collecting information from two sources with two people, and without there being any perception or minimizing the perception of bias, because neither one of those parenting coordinators will talk to the other parent.
Mhm.
They each focus on their person. They bring the information together, and then based on the training, their job is to work out a common sense solution to most of the problems, uh, and then to present that and work on a parenting plan. And a lot of times, it's I found it very effective. I've had cases in 24 hours uh, stopped in court, and children and gone from an abusive parent. And of course, one of the processes when you're getting into a parenting coordination or an advocacy, we also have advocates that are there, is that I've had cases where children don't want, or parents don't want their children spoken to. Okay, they could be of age appropriate kids, maybe 12, 13, 14 years of age, and one parent is trying to keep them silent, is abusing them. And I've had the opportunity to do video recorded interviews with those children. I have then gone ahead and helped those children do an affidavit for the court, which they have the legal right to do in Canada at 12 years of age, as long as they have the mental capacity. They have the legal right in this country to submit an affidavit and have it sworn. I've had cases where the following day, once the abuser's lawyer has received that affidavit from the child, instant reversal of custody, and the child is happy as, use the term, a pig in shit. And I've got letters from kids thanking me for how effective, because that's one of the things when we're in these cases is that the parent who is doing the abusing and is doing these alienating behaviors that we refer to, which is going to cause the trauma, if we can catch it early enough, most of these people are trying to silence their children. Okay. I just received, in fact, just yesterday, I received an email from 2 Children's Aid Society workers here, and this is a case going on right today, where the workers sent the father a notice. I've spoken to the children. I have video recorded interviews of the children describing abuse. I've contacted the Children's Aid Society and to give my experience as what would be some of the solutions. And the 2 workers who are not registered social workers with the, as they should be under the law, they sent an email back, said, if Mr. Beck shows up or is part of the interview, we are not going to come and see the father. And it's because they had taken a biased position against the mother, or in favor of the mother in that case, based on false allegations. And so unfortunately, this is what happens in many of these cases of when Children's Aid Society gets involved. What happens, you have some of these professionals, they take a side, and then once they realize they made a mistake, they have to circle the wagons. So yeah, I actually have an email. They said if Mr. Beck shows up, and yet if you go to their guidelines, the standards under the province, it says they're supposed to get information from whatever sources, whoever makes the complaint, and to investigate that. But they're afraid of me.
Yeah.
They're afraid of somebody that's probably got more experience than they have in diagnosing that. And they don't want to lose a paying client because, as we all know, children's aid agencies get a lot of money from, certainly in this province, from the province of Ontario, to have cases continue.
Right.
And then you have ongoing workers going on for a year, 2 years. So this is the type of stuff that's going on. And yet, when I spoke to the kids, they were more than willing. One of the boys was only 7 years of age. Okay.
Wow.
But they were more than willing to give their thumbs up, thumbs down when I asked questions and to answer. They were becoming of an age where they could understand and were willing to talk about it. So, and that is one area we need, what I've always certainly do, and we need more video recorded interviews with children, whether it's through child protection, whether it's in the family courts. We need this because certainly with my 28 years of involvement in this, I have a pile of videos from children actually stating that they had been told to lie by Children's Aid Society workers and Office of the Children's Aid Society workers. Yeah. I have the video.
I watched, let me just say
let
this.
me finish off.
Okay.
The one video I just did a few days ago, the 7-year-old boy told me, I asked him, I said, oh, did you meet the worker? He said, yeah, I met her at school, but I don't like her because she told me I'm to keep secrets from my daddy. Mm. This is just a few days ago.
Yeah.
So this is what's going on out there.
I just watched a video with Oprah where she had the children interviewed, the Broderick children, and the youngest, Danny Broderick, literally said that behind the scenes, the courts was telling him what to say. You know, their mother killed the father and the new stepmom, but why would they make kids say things when it comes to this kind of stuff? Because the child is already traumatized. And once you start making the child lie, they start believing in their own lies to protect themselves. So sometimes these videos that you do, I know that in my case, where my kids were teenagers, had to lie. And as adults, they're going, I didn't write that. So they don't always remember. And I believe this is where dissociative disorders come in, right, Joe? Like they don't remember what they did because they were forced to do something.
In order to live with an abusive parent where there's no way to escape or avoid their environment, where no one is coming to their rescue, they have to adapt, they have to cope, and they have to find a way of surviving with the attachment and dependency with this parent. And in order to do that, the process of suppressing the thought that this parent is an abusive parent is something that happens constantly in the child's life. They're constantly forgetting the fact that this person's abusing them, mistreating them, punishing them, hurting their feelings. And every time they suppress the thought, the memory, and any traces of the fact that they're an abusive parent is what leads to this state of amnesia, because they're damaging their brain. They're damaging and impairing the functionality of the hippocampus. And when they do that, the stage of losing this episodic memory of their experience of abuse goes away. And it makes it possible for them to live with that parent and think that everything's fine. Everything's great. Nothing's wrong here, because they not only forget that they're living with an abusive parent, they don't even remember how they forgot to forget.
Right. And they're also trying to impress that parent so that they get feedback, good feedback, get love back, conditional love. I was one of them. I was an alienated child. I had to basically beg to get attention as a child, to grow up, to be paired up with a person that was alienated. And I went through the same. I had to basically beg for love. And when the kids came, the kids had to beg for love. So this is like a condition that I went through, and my children picked it off of me. So I basically have to blame myself for staying with the abuser. But if I didn't stay with the abuser, I would be dead. My children would be dead.
Now, Joe, and Mary, just to interject here, Mary, you're mentioning something, and Joe mentioned earlier in his when he spoke a few minutes ago about when a child feels that they have no place where they can get help. That's one of the things that a parent will do is, yes, of course, you're trying to isolate. One of the things that if we're able to get help to that child at an early stage, and one of the things that I do, I have children who call me themselves, no parent there. They get on their cell phone. Some of the kids are 12, 13. They call me because now they have learned about me, and they will phone up and they'll say, Mr. Beck, can you help me here? This is going on. So when they do learn that there is help out there and they have access to that, that has a tremendous help for them, and can prevent it from getting worse, because yes, they now realize there is some place to go.
Right.
And yes, I've got kids who actually call me. I don't even call them. I've spoken to them. Give them my phone number. They know who I am. They know I'm an advocate. I've explained that. I send them a brochure. Their parents give me a brochure, what I do. I've even I'll send them letters from other kids who have thanked me. I'll give them some referral letters to say, here's some other kids I helped over the years. Okay. And you can call me anytime. And as a result, yes, I'm able to stop this process by getting help for the children at an early stage.
Yes.
I just want to say I have to apologize because I have a call I have to make. Unfortunately, I have to leave the podcast at this moment, but
We're almost done.
thank you for the invitation, and thank you for bringing me and Vern together again. Vern, it's great to see you, and I'm just going to let Vern pick up where I'm saying goodbye, and thank you.
Thank you,
Everybody
Joe.
listening to the podcast.
I gotta run soon too, so
yes,
I don't have
we
much
all
time.
do.
Oh,
But thank you very much, Vernon and Joe, Andy. It's been very informative. I'm gonna get you all to come back, maybe individually, and you can talk on your own and share a lot of your help out there, because therapists need to know what you are talking about in order to help our next child that's going to be going through this stuff. So,
Mary, can I ask the guys before they
yes,
leave a really
yes.
quick question? Well, number one, I'm very angry because Mary will never have, and well, most likely be a grandmother or see her grandchildren. I will be a grandfather in 9 days. Secondly, I wanted to ask the guys, what would preempt, again, using my wife's sister's situation, the youngest child of the family, alienating the siblings' children instead of their own? Do you guys see much of that, and what creates the desire to do that?
well, I'm going to let Vern answer that, but I really do have to apologize, Andy. I've got to run. So anyway, thank you again for the invitation, and I'll let Vern answer that question.
Yeah, all right. Nice seeing you, Joe. Yeah, Vern, it's all yours.
I'll hang in for a few. I'll hang in for a few more minutes then to go on. You're asking me what causes people to do that.
Yeah, the sibling.
Well, I think, again, I'm not a psychologist, but certainly from my many years of experience, and I work with psychologists and professionals, and certainly a lot of the research and educational materials that we pass on is that it's one of the factors is, for instance, it's the behavior or the upbringing of the parents themselves.
Right.
If they become, just as we know, if a parent grows up in an abusive environment as a child, those behaviors may get carried over into the next generation. And when I'm talking to young people, whether it's a young girl or a boy, I said, one of the first things you're going to do if you're thinking of getting together or getting married or getting into a relationship to have a kid, make sure you look at the family. Mm-hmm. And if you find that your boyfriend or girlfriend does not get along with their family, and there's fighting going on, right, and you were in children's aid for a number of years, and I said those things are going to carry on, which of course is why I believe, or I have a passion with the work I do, because I believe that the divorce industry is creating, because of monetary reasons, and of course the reasons why lawyers are obligated to fight for their client. Well, there's nothing in that they're there to fight for children. They're there to fight for their client. So they're setting up the litigation, and of course it does so much damage that we are entering an era where we're suffering the consequences of all these marriage breakdowns, and the kids now getting another generation of broken homes, problems with drugs and alcohol. I firmly believe that a lot of these young people that are experiencing problems is as a result of family breakdown, because more than 50% of families break down. In fact, it was just yesterday I spoke to someone I know. He's a Jehovah's Witness, but he volunteers down at the jail in Toronto. I think it's down off Horner Avenue. I think it's Toronto Detention Center. And he knows the work that I do, helping children and families. And he was saying, Vern, he says, I work at the jail on a regular basis down there. And he says, what you're doing, he says, I can see that many of the men who are incarcerated in jail right now, suffering from all kinds of these problems and are in jail, I can see that it stems back to the breakup of their families and things like that.
Yeah, the 3 people that killed my brother, that was their excuse, that they were alienated from their fathers. Yeah. Mothers love to raise their children, but you can't raise a child on just by yourself. I know I was um, a single mom through the military raising. I was married, but single. And I found it very difficult. I used to just like, oh, thank God he's coming through the door to help me with the kids. Like, thank God he's coming to see the kids. Thank God he's home, sort of mentality, right? I never said that, oh, you can't come in to see the kids. I always opened the door. But to be alienated from your own children because he couldn't handle me saying I need a divorce because I don't want to be alone anymore. He used my kids. So when they
Yeah, well,
do that,
again, and,
when
and
they
again,
do,
and again, Mary, you have to remember talking about, you wanted a divorce. Well, that sets off the mindset that that other parent's going to go seek a lawyer
right?
now. And what are
So
the
that,
lawyers obligated to do? Well, if you want a
well, that's
divorce,
it.
we have to get the kids over here because you get money, okay, and control over the other parent. So that's the way the
But
law, the
he
legal
had the
system.
but you just so you know that he had the flashback of what his parents went through, but he was just a little child to
Yeah,
not see his father. But he had the alienating tactics right down pat by the time he had children. So the kids grew up with that.
yeah,
So it
and
was
that's why
easier. It was
it's so important. Had you been educated before you married the guy, and you knew about that, you may not have chosen that person to be the partner. But this is
well, that's hearsay because you don't know the situation. I was forced into a marriage. I gave him the benefit of doubt to take care of him, to raise him with love, show
yeah.
him what love was. It
And
didn't work.
unfortunately,
You can't teach them anything when they don't want to, is what I'm
yeah.
trying to say. And
And
it's
unfortunately, in life, unfortunately, we all of us have gone through some lessons in life.
right,
It's
but
just, and tragedies. It's really part of our existence on this earth. And to give you a opposite to what you're telling me, I divorced. I met my first wife when she was 12 years of age. Okay, people might call me, stealing out of the cradle. I think I was 16, but by the time she was 17, we went together for 5 years. She was pregnant at 17. By the time she was 18, we had 2 children. Now, again, that was okay back then. I'm a baby boomer. It was, not such a bad thing back then. But by the time I was 20, I owned 2 houses. I had a car. I could provide easily. But because we had met so young, that presents a difficulty as well. I became a single father at 22 years. Well, because maybe about 24. Because when I had 2 girls, when they were about 6 and 7, I became a single father, and I raised 2 girls right up until they finished their schooling. But you know what? They always got to see their mother, and to this day, I never got a penny in child support. And to this day, I met with the mother just a couple of days ago to see my granddaughter, our grandchild, at her dance recital in Burlington. And my kids are there. She can bring her boyfriend there. I can bring, my female partner. Everything's fine.
well,
Our
you're one of
kids,
the lucky ones because
yes,
I made mine ex. I know will keep my grandchildren from me. He keeps my
yeah.
kids away from me. So there's not just me. There's millions out there. There's
But the idea
grandparents
is we're trying to
dying.
we're hopefully through education we're going to try to hopefully get people to realize the damage they're doing to their own children and their own
Yes,
futures. If we can get that over to them, and of course, even in our parenting plan and our parenting workshop that we teach people, teaching them about the harm to children as a result of family breakup is one of the things that we give to all the parents. Now I have to watch my time as well. It's
yes,
getting
me
after
too.
2 o'clock,
Me
so
too. But
I
thank
think
you
I am.
so much.
I think I'm going to have to run.
Okay,
And
thank you, Vernon. Don't jump off yet. I just want to say goodbye to the viewers. If you want to contact Vernon, I got his email up there, so you could always contact him and Joe Goldberg. So, but thank you, everybody out there. Please don't give up on your children, your parents, even if you're alienated from a grandparent. Don't give up on any of them. I've seen beautiful reunifications in my life, and to lose a parent and not bury them is going to haunt you for the rest of your life. But But anyways, thank you, and we'll see you on Sunday night on Let's Talk Real Talk with the Andy Martin Show. Thank you, Vernon, Joe Goldberg, and Andy
You're
Martin.
welcome.